Sanje chedang so chi chu nam la chen chu ba do dani cha su chi da gi jin zo ji pe se nam ru la pen chi san ji ru ba ju Sanje chedang so chi chu nam la chen chu ba do dani cha su chi Dagi jinzo je pe sanam je Drula penche sanje drubaj Sanje chedan sochi chonam la Janchu padu dani chapsuj Dagi jinzo je pe sanam je Drula penche sanje drubaj Then sawe lama rimboji Dagi chiwo peme den shula Kadin chimbo gane jezonde Kusundu jinadu sadu so. So firstly, good morning to everybody. We're going to continue from where we left off yesterday in this explanation of the 7 points of mind training. As you remember, we've begun the second point, the main training, the main practice in the two types of bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta and conventional or relative bodhicitta. We already completed the instructions for ultimate bodhicitta, and we began to study the instructions for conventional or relative bodhicitta. And the core instruction, the principal instruction for that is the meditation of sending and taking, which is the way we carry out the exchange of oneself for others by meditating that we accept the sufferings experienced by all beings and the causes that create such suffering, the negative actions, we take it upon ourselves, and in exchange, so to speak, we send to them, we give to them all our present happiness and the causes of future happiness in the sense of all our virtuous actions. So we went through that according to Kamatin Rinpoche's commentary, and Rinpoche has explained how we link this, as the root text tells us to do, we link this exchange, this send and taking, with the flow of the breath. On the out breath we send the virtue and happiness, and on the in breath we absorb the sufferings and negative actions of others. So he's explained that, in particular talking about the taking of the negativities from others. And then Rinpoche adds a special instruction to this, or a special way of doing the taking of sufferings. He says, if one meditates upon oneself as a yidam, such as Chenrezig, then what you can do to make this taking practice effective is visualize that the black air, or the pollution which embodies the sufferings that others are experiencing and their negative actions, it is absorbed into the clear appearance of the deity. So you are meditating yourself as Chenrezi, with the pride of being Chenrezi and with the clarity of the appearance of your body as that of Chenrezi. So if you're doing that, then take the sufferings of others in the form of the black smoke and absorb it into your body, that is to say Chenrezi's body. And when the black air is absorbed into the clear appearance of the deity, Chenrezi then shines with a brilliant white light, like sunlight striking the side of a snow mountain. In other words, the black pollution which embodies all the sufferings of others doesn't diminish the Chenrez's appearance, which is of course brilliant white in color, but even strengthens it. It strengthens it. It increases his whiteness. And in this way, Rinpoche says, generate immeasurable compassion, compassion without any limit or any boundaries, and think that the misdeeds, the negative actions of all sentient beings, of the 6 classes, meaning the 6 realms, from the hells, ghosts, animals, humans, asuras, and God realms, are purified, because you're taking them into yourself as Chenrezig. And that each of those beings populating the 6 realms becomes free from whatever sufferings they have. So this is a special method one can apply, if one wishes, to enhance the practice of taking. Then Rinpoche continues. Next, as one breathes out through, white light goes out to the realms, the 6 realms, and the physical forms of each being of the 6 classes, and is absorbed into them. So actually here one can do this even whether or not one is in the form of Chenrezig, meaning if you're not using the Chenrezig visualization at this time, then just as you breathe in the black air through your nostrils and down into your heart, now as you breathe out, you imagine that all your virtue and all your happiness is emitted in the form of white rays, usually described as like moon rays. And that goes out and touches all the sentient beings and purifies them of their suffering and their negative actions. Of course, there's one point here, it says physical forms of each being. Now one might have a question, because of course it is true that we humans and also beings in the animal realms do have at least what appears to be a physical form. Of course, ultimately everything is the appearance of mind. But nevertheless, relatively speaking, humans have a kind of organic form, whereas beings in the God realms, the Asura realms, and the hell realms and ghost realms, their bodies are what we call mind-made. They're no more substantial than the body which we imagine we have in a dream. Nevertheless, here the point is, they're still in all these realms. For the beings themselves, they still have the imagination that they have a form, they have a kind of shape, a kind of location. So therefore it's not contradictory to say that the light rays purify their forms. So if one is doing it as Chenrezig, then it will be the light rays coming from your nostrils, but also from every pores of your appearance as Chenrezig. Through this radiation, this sending of the virtue and happiness to others, all of one's virtue and happiness becomes a vast and inexhaustible treasury of space, and each being obtains whatever they need. It means a treasury of space is like something, it's like the ability to draw from space any properties that are needed for others. And so what you're bestowing gives others everything they need in terms of happiness and in terms of virtue. Everything without limit. So it's like said to be a treasury of space. Think that now free of suffering, these beings enjoy happiness and well-being in body and mind until they reach the state of Buddhahood. So you want them to have happiness now and virtue now, and of course ultimately you want them to have Buddhahood, the ultimate bliss. So both temporal bliss and good conditions and the ultimate bliss of Buddhahood. This is what you are meditating occurs for beings through your radiation of lights. In this way, generate limitless loving kindness towards all beings. Then Rinpoche says, so this description of sending taking is the actual practice for regular meditation sessions. So when you're meditating conventional bodhicitta, this is how you apply it in the session of meditation. But the same attitude of giving everything to others and giving everything positive to others and taking everything negative onto yourself from them should be applied in the post-meditative state. So it's like you don't cease the intention of sending and taking just when you finish the meditation. You bring it into everyday life, where of course there'll be endless opportunities to practice sending and taking, because one is continually encountering people with people with difficulties. Rinpoche says, it is said that sending and taking is practiced, as this particular meditation of Tonglen is practiced, connected with the breath, because it is easy to focus the mind. It ensures that the training is swift, that it really, bodhicitta is engendered very rapidly in you through this practice. And it subdues numerous concepts, as we said yesterday. By linking the meditation of sending and taking to it is already, in a way, taking it from the intellect, from the head, so to speak, into the kind of the heart. So it's not going to be just a kind of trivial, intellectual, conceptual play. It's going to be deeper than that, because it's linked with the natural flow of the breath. Again, to describe its qualities, Rinpoche says, this practice of Tonglen is also the essence of the four immeasurables, or the four limitlesses. And to practice sending is to practice limitless loving kindness, because you're wishing, may they have happiness. I'm sending them my happiness, and the cause of happiness. Taking is immeasurable or limitless compassion, because now you're thinking, they have suffering, and in response to that suffering, I absorb it into myself, and those causes of suffering, compassion. To visualize the dispelling of all beings' sufferings and their establishment in happiness is the third limitless, immeasurable joy, which is, of course, to rejoice that others have achieved the happiness which is free from suffering. And to practice this, to meditate this with impartiality towards friends and enemies alike, is immeasurable equanimity, or limitless equanimity, the fourth limitless. In other words, when you're doing this sending and taking, you don't just do it for your friends, or those near to you, those related to you. You do it equally to even those who appear to be your enemy at this present time. So it is absolutely all-embracing, absolutely without division or restriction. So just this practice of Tonglen includes each of the four limitlesses. Now, Rinpoche at this point wants to, in a way, answer potential questions that people might have, which could cause them to hesitate about doing the practice. You may ask, well, would anybody have hesitation? Actually, yes. In fact, historically it seems that in Tibet, when this practice was taught, there were some people who were kind of had a doubting reaction to it, that it should be practiced. And nowadays also there might be some hesitations or uncertainties about the practice. So Rinpoche is going to answer them here. So the question is, the putative question is, might not the taking the suffering of others bring harm to me? That question might occur to one, just as it has occurred to other people. So, in fact, this can be answered. This question can be answered in four points, as you will see. So, firstly, one way Rinpoche's answers. So, firstly, one way to answer this question is by considering those masters such as Geshe Chekawa himself. Geshe Chekawa Yeshidoji, the one who composed the 7 points of instruction for Lojong. He mastered the exceptional bodhicitta of the exchange of self and others. And in him, as well as other masters we can think of, self-clinging has become completely exhausted. Actually, Geshe Chekawa in another text tells the story that on one time he was invited to a monastery where one of his friends was staying, but when he got there, he was treated very, very badly by his friend, the person he thought was his friend, and by the monks of that monastery, really badly. But he said, but solely through my reliance on the practice of sending and taking, I was able to transform all these difficulties into the path to enlightenment. And again, it is said, for instance, Shama Rinpoche, Kunchen Yunlek said that Geshe Chekawa achieved the first noble bodhisattva bhumi through this practice. So we can consider the example of the great holders of this teaching, the early Kadampa Geshes, as a kind of answer to this. That it does not bring suffering to oneself. In fact, the very opposite, because through this we exhaust all self-clinging, and therefore we should. Just as they enter this practice with great enthusiasm and great joy, so should we. And at this point, Rinpoche quotes this famous line from Shantideva. They, meaning they, bodhisattvas, they will even enter the Avicii hell, the interminable hell, the lowest of the 8 hot hells. They'll even enter the Avicii hell like geese plunging into a lotus lake. It means that if one generates bodhicitta, like a authentic bodhisattva, one will not be afraid of any difficulties. Instead, one will rejoice in entering even into the most difficult situations. As Rinpoche says, they have accepted others' suffering and wish to experience that suffering, and having perfected the special practice of send and taking, would gladly experience all of this suffering in a single moment for the sake of their happiness, meaning the happiness of others. And of course, in this point, in discussing this particular answer, one should remember the example of Shakyamuni Buddha himself. His very journey to Buddhahood, I think I already mentioned this story, began when, having been reborn in hell through to his negative actions, his violent actions, the future Buddha then, seeing other beings born in hell being afflicted with great suffering, told the guards guarding the beings, give the suffering to me. I will take that suffering from that person onto myself. And when this exchange of self and others happened, but in just that moment, then the future Buddha was immediately liberated from hell and began his journey to Buddhahood. But it's because of his fearless attitude that occurred. So, like it says, you would gladly experience all of this suffering in a single moment for the sake of their happiness. Now, that leads to the second point. However, in terms of experiencing the sufferings of others that you're taking onto yourself, that you're willing to take onto yourself, actually it may be understood, Rinpoche says, through scripture, as to what Lord Buddha has taught in the sutras, that the ripening of a negative action performed by any being of the 6 realms can only be experienced in the aggregates of the one who does that action. The result cannot, in fact, be transferred to another. So that's like it said in the sutras, like where do the effects of karma ripen? They do not ripen in the water or in stone. They ripen solely in the aggregates of the one who has done the deed. So aggregates meaning the five constituents, the form, feeling, perception, formations and consciousness, which conditioned phenomena make up that which we cling to as a self. We cling to in error as a self. So the skandhas are rising and passing away from moment to moment, from life to life, and it is in the continuum of the aggregates of the one who does it that an action will ripen. It cannot be transferred to anything external or to another person. So that is actually how it is. And of course His Holiness talked about this a couple of days ago. So, no, it is not true that the suffering can be experienced by anyone other than the one who does the deed. And then point 3, in which it says, furthermore, when the previous Buddhas practiced sending and taking, they never experienced the sins, obscurations or sufferings of other beings within their own bodies, like the example I used of the Bodhisattva at the beginning of his spiritual career, when he was willing to take on the torture that another being was having in hell. In fact, he was liberated from that hell situation and reborn in the higher realms immediately. So he didn't actually experience the ripening of that suffering on himself. Yet, by their willingness to do this practice, Rinpoche says, through the heart of compassion engendered by the practice, they travel the 5 paths, from the path of accumulation to the path of no more learning, and the 10 bhumis, the 10 noble bodhisattva bhumis, from the joyful bhumi to the cloud of Dharma, and through that they attained ultimate enlightenment, all through engendering compassion through this practice of taking this, exchanging self and others. So it is said that we too, we also, through the skillful means of great compassion, if we imitate this example of the bodhisattvas and Buddhas, can attain to this state. We will come to traverse the 5 paths, the 10 noble levels, and achieve Buddhahood. And the essence of engendering compassion in the bodhisattva career is the meditation of sending and taking. Now, a kind of answer to this question in a way from the point of view of reasoning. We've had, Rinpoche has mentioned, the scriptural citations, scriptural sources for this. Now, how do we understand this through reasoning, that it is in fact entirely proper, entirely correct to practice send and taking, and we will not experience the ripening of another's suffering on one's own continuum. So Rinpoche makes a long quotation from Sakya Pandita, the great embodiment of Manjushri, one of the 5 founding fathers of the Sakya tradition. In Sakya Pandita's great work, Tomsam Rabye, discriminating the 3 vows, which is a small advertisement, I should say. I'm currently teaching in London and Germany. Anyway, advertisement time over. Rinpoche quotes from Sakya Pandita to answer this question. Some say, this is Sapan now, some say that the bodhicitta of exchange is not a suitable object of meditation. So some masters were saying that in Tibet in the 12th and 13th centuries. Well, think of it this way. Examine whether the bodhicitta of exchanging self and other is virtuous or non-virtuous. If it is virtuous, and of course it is, if it is virtuous, this is inconsistent with it giving rise to suffering. If it were non-virtuous, the action of exchanging must arise from the 3 poisons, But this exchange cannot come from the three poisons. Three poisons meaning hatred, desire, and ignorance. Because as Nagarjuna has said in the Jewel Garland, to define non-virtue, non-virtuous acts are those which arise from the three poisonous intentions: desire, hatred, and ignorance. But of course, practicing sending taking does not arise from those motivations, so it cannot be non-virtuous. This being so, because it is not non-virtuous, how can suffering arise? This takes us back to the fundamental teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the very first Lama teaching given by Lord Buddha. And there it is said, the noble truth, first noble truth is there is suffering. And second noble truth is what is origination, is cause, is self-clinging. Self-clinging and the following non-virtues are the cause of suffering. So only suffering's only source is non-virtuous intention. It cannot, just like rice can only come from a rice seed and not from a barley seed, so suffering can only come from non-virtuous actions and intentions. So it is obvious that therefore practicing exchanges self for another, which is an entirely virtuous intention, one is renouncing self-clinging in opening oneself to the sufferings of others, one is stepping outside of selfishness, one is becoming free from any attachment to self in that very moment of practicing exchange. It cannot cause suffering. So there is nothing in the practice of exchanging and taking the sufferings of others which can cause suffering. It's like it's established through correct reasoning. And Sapan continues, furthermore, not all prayers of the mind training practice of bodhisattvas are unlimited in their effects. If they had such force, Maitrayanica's head, that is the name of the Buddha when he was that bodhisattva to be, born in hell, would be in agony forever. But of course it wasn't. He didn't actually experience the physical transfer of the suffering of the person who he wanted to free from suffering. Even the Buddhas of the three times, the Buddhas of the past, the present, and the future, because they practiced the exchange of self and others, would experience continual suffering. And all those beings they exchange with would endure no samsaric suffering. Well, in that case, you see, the very first time a Buddha practiced exchanging suffering, exchanging self and other, and took the sufferings of others, all the suffering in samsara would have dried up. Because the Buddha, of course, sincerely practices exchanging self and other, sending and taking, but it is a practice. It doesn't actually happen in that way. So he himself the Buddha would always have experienced suffering because he would take it on from others, and they would never have experienced suffering. But that has not actually occurred, as one can see. Now the present-day Buddhas, they're practicing this, but still beings experience suffering, and the Buddhas themselves do not experience suffering. Future Buddhas will practice it. Future beings will not be freed from suffering merely by that, and the future Buddhas will not experience that suffering. So words such as these, like those people criticizing the send and taking, saying, you shouldn't practice this because you'll experience suffering yourself. Words such as this should be known as the counsel or the advice of Mara. It is like a deliberate attempt to confuse people and to distract people from practicing the authentic bodhisattva path. As he concludes, the exchange of self and other, and therefore Tonglen, is said to be the heart of the Buddha's teaching. So Rinpoche concludes this quote from Sakipandita saying, therefore, since this practice of Tonglen is in accordance with the words of Lama Manju Gosha, Manjughosha is another name for Manjushri, and Lama Manjushri is none other than Sakyapandita. You should practice this with joy. So in this way, the response has been made to those who might be nervous or hesitant to practice sending and taking. To sum up, both from scriptures, the examples of the past, and from reasoning, we can see that there is nothing to fear about practicing send and taking. Quite the reverse. One should joyfully practice send and taking because it's the key way to achieving Buddhahood for the benefit of others. Because again, one might say, well then why practice? If it doesn't immediately take the sufferings of others, why practice it? And the answer is because you train in the Bodhisattva bodhicitta. Your bodhicitta gets stronger and stronger, vaster and vaster, the more you practice send and taking. And that will then culminate in your achieving Buddhahood, when you'll be equipped with unhindered power, all-embracing compassion, and undiminished wisdom, through which three qualities or three powers you can effectively help beings to discover the path to enlightenment, just as you vowed you would when you made the Bodhisattva vow. So practicing send and taking is extremely effective as the means of achieving Buddhahood. But it is not, you should not be confused and think you will presently experience the suffering in yourself that you're willing to take from others. Then Rinpoche wants to just say a little bit more about the practice. During the main practice in formal sessions mean like, sitting practice, because of course he's already indicated that you should try to continue the attitude of send and taking in everyday life. During the main practice in formal sessions, endeavor in the absorptions of shamatha and vipassana, and make a special effort in send and taking. So he's talking now about both bodhicitta meditations. The ultimate bodhicitta meditation leads you to the qualities of calm abiding, shamatha, and vipassana, direct insight. And your conventional bodhicitta is, of course, to make a special effort in send and taking. Now, if you practice, Rinpoche wants to add another special instruction, if you practice Tantun Jalpo's meditation and recitation of Chenrezig, which we all call the benefit of beings that pervades space, which we're doing every day, of course, here, and which I think everybody practices at home and in the various centers. If you're practicing that, you can unite the recitation of the 6 syllables with the visualization of sending and taking, so that when you're reciting the 6 syllables, you can use this as a method of taking the suffering of others and sending the happiness and virtue to others. So synchronize it, just as normally we would synchronize the send and taking with the inflow and outflow of the breath. In the Tantun Jalpa meditation, if we wish, we can synchronize the mantra recitation with the send and taking. Of course, the different visualizations one can apply during the recitation of the mantra in Chenrezig practice, in accord with the original instructions of Tantun Jalpo and Jamgon Control and the 15th Karmapa and so on. But here, for those who want to combine Lojong with Chenrezig practice, is a very effective way to do it in terms of sending and taking united with the 6-syllable mantra. At the end of your session, Rinpoche says, the end of your session of practice, conclude with short or extensive mind training aspiration prayers as appropriate, and seal. They're actually, Rinpoche has not printed them out here, but in the Damnak Zur, the Treasury of Spiritual Instructions, Contra Rinpoche has appended some mind training aspiration prayers. So you can find them there. And seal the session with prayers and dedications, such as the aspiration prayer of good conduct. In fact, if one practiced that, the king of aspiration prayers. This would be a wonderful mind training aspiration in itself. Or even if one just recited a few verses from it in the aspiration prayer. So this completes the section concerning the practice of mind training in informal sessions. And next, there will be instruction in the subsequent stage, just as we were given instructions in how to extend ultimate bodhicitta into everyday life by training in seeing everything as illusory. So the principle of taking the sufferings of others onto oneself, now one will be given instructions for how one can practice that in everyday life, in the subsequent stage. I think yesterday one or two people wanted to ask questions. I'm pretty sure His Holiness answered all conceivable questions yesterday, but if there's some small technical question you still have concerning the Lojong, then we could clear it up now before carrying on with the text.
Please come up here, please.
Is this a game show, Danny?
What do I win? Right here. Thank you, Lama, Jampa, Thaye, for your teachings. Just on this morning, and you mentioned about Mara and how to. Maybe I'll skip that bit, but
Mara is very interesting.
yeah. No, my question is like, I mean, these teachings were given a long time ago.
Yeah.
Where concepts about the world were really just concepts because there was no, rather than, like, so you only had knowledge of your maybe local environment.
Yes.
In contemporary society with social media and all this bombardment of suffering from everywhere that we can tap into, I could see a danger of someone practicing this and maybe someone who's already in a mildly neurotic state, practicing this and going into deeper and deeper neurotic states, going out into the world to try and find suffering that they can take upon themselves.
Actually, Rinpoche will talk later about that, about don't go out and look for suffering. He will actually, he's brought that up himself in the commentary, that that's not what you should do. But on your point, in more general, so that's one point that's very important. But on the general point, first of all, I'd say that one should only practice Lojong, or any Dhamma, in fact, if possible, only in consultation with one's personal Lama. Because he should be able to see, or she should be able to see whether it will work for you, or whether it's the time now for you to practice. Because in a way, you see, Lojong is, it's said, it was described as a secret practice of the Mahayana, meaning it's very powerful. So although one says it's not a tantric practice and therefore doesn't need initiations and shouldn't be treated with the same reserve as Vajrayana, in a way one should be very careful about it. So therefore my first advice is to discuss with your personal Lama whether this is now the time for you to practice it. Then also one might say, and I've heard Rinpoche himself take this to people, well, if you like, just start with sending the happiness. Just start with that practice. You'll gradually build up kind of joy and strength in yourself, which is a very important point. You see, one might say, how do you know somebody's practicing send and taking? And one answer might be, oh, they look very miserable. Then they've got it wrong. Kamachame says, bodhicitta is eternal bliss. So, in fact, the mind training should make you very joyful, very happy. If it's not doing that, it's not really working. So, therefore, at the very least, if one is oversensitive, so to speak, or not particularly happy in one's life, or had great kind of negative emotions towards oneself, either don't practice the Lojong, just get instruction on something like shamatha, or practice the loving kindness meditation to others, or practice, if it's Lojong, just the sending happiness. So all these are kind of qualifications one should make about this. And then as for social media, nobody should be going out looking for the suffering in the world through social media and giving your money to the oligarchs and all these other people. Just my personal advice. Okay, but it's very good. Thank you for raising this, because that allows us to clarify many points. Thank you.
Yes. I have a few questions.
Yeah.
First one, when I do practice Tonglen, in the beginning of practice, I really feel when I take suffering.
You really what, sorry?
When I do practice.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel that in the beginning of practice,
Yes.
that with inhalation,
Yeah.
I take dark air with suffering of other sentient
Yeah.
being. But after a few minutes, this practice starts as very formal. I'm just, in my imagination, I'm just,
Yes. At that point, leave
accepting
it.
air.
At
But-
that point, leave it. Relax it. When it becomes like just conceptual, and then it's a sign. Let the practice rest. Just settle. Go to the settling meditation, and leave behind. Don't overstrain. One should, in a way, when it becomes a strain or when it becomes artificial, you've done enough for that time. Don't worry. There's not a set amount you need to do. Sometimes in a practice it might be 1 minute is effective. Another practice it might be 10 or 15 minutes. But go with your intuition on this. Don't persist, because otherwise you'll start to dislike the practice. It'll become just boring and routine. So, as they say, quit while you're ahead.
And can you give instruction of short meditation? Because when I start to sit and to meditate, and I think that I need to do this practice for my mom, for my friends, for people who I like, after for my enemies, after for all sentient beings. It's in my mind, I'm thinking that it's too long, and too difficult for me.
You should feel that even if there's somebody uppermost in your mind, immediately everybody is there. Don't go out trying to bring more and more people in. It's too artificial, too contrived. Yeah.
And one more question. Actually, it's usually I am not able to take this dark air with suffering for one breath. So I need few breaths in.
No, it's more like this. It's your normal breathing. It's not a yogic practice, as it should make very clear. It's not pranayama. You're not trying to do this slowly. It's just like we're sitting now. It's just like we're sitting now. It's coming in, it's going out. It's coming in, it's going out. It's not like that. So don't slow it down. And it doesn't, so it's much less technical than it sounds. It's not like a yogic instruction. Really, it's very, very important to understand that. There's a place for pranayama in the Zorim, in the completion stages, in Vajrayana, but this is not such a practice. It's just your ordinary coming in, going out, coming in, going out.
Thank you. And last question.
She's asking them on behalf of all beings. She's practicing the Bodhisattva way.
You give answer for questions that people, they're really scary that they accept the suffering of others.
Yeah.
But some people, they really enjoyed that they give too much, I don't know, good things for others.
They give away too much.
Yeah, too much. My question, when we do this practice, we do only with our mind, so we just working only with our consciousness, or we really do something?
Well, no, the Bodhisattva should practice giving. It is the first perfection, and we should respond to people's needs. But, for instance, we have many responsibilities. We may have family, we may have Sangha to support, we may have our village to support. So whatever we give, we must give with intelligence. So we understand, I need to have something to give tomorrow. And also, I need to have food to eat tomorrow, because otherwise I'll be taking from others. So I must give moderately and intelligently. our intention is to give everything, but how we give everything must be intelligent. Because, again, it said like, if the practice of giving was actually just physically giving, then there would be no poverty in the world, because the Buddhas have perfected the practice of giving, but there's still poverty. And the answer is, for that is because it is the intention to give everything away which is most important. So we should give what we can. We should practice giving, physical giving of support and gifts and so on. But like I say, that must be done sensibly so that we're not a burden on others after we've given everything away. I give everything away today, then I have to go and ask the state to give me money tomorrow. Or the taxpayer, not the state. So,
Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much. For me, it's
Okay.
very important.
okay.
Thank you for your teachings, and thank you for clarifying that tongling is really not harmful.
Yeah.
This was a dilemma I also have
Yes.
struggled with. My
But
question,
we should still, on that, if we have fear of Tonglen, we shouldn't just beat ourselves and say, don't have fear, it's not right to have fear. If we're still hesitant emotionally, then emphasize the practice of the sending first, and then one will gradually, as it were, relax about it. So don't force yourself against your emotional feelings. It'll kick back against you. Sorry.
thank you. My question is, in a normal practice, where in the build-up phase or somewhere else could we integrate that? Let's say after taking refuge, or in the dissolving phase, or in the build-up phase, there are a lot of pauses we make. Could we integrate that into the practice?
Yes, well, for instance, one could integrate sending and taking after the bodhicitta practice. After one has done the premise, refuge and bodhicitta, then one can do some sending and taking. For instance, this is in some nundros, this is how it is taught, that here's the place to do tonglen, after the bodhicitta and before moving to vajrasattva.
Thank
That'll be
you.
one place. Okay.
Thank you so much for your teachings, Lama Jampa Thaye.
Mm-mm.
You said before that karma cannot be transferred.
Yes, but His
No.
Holiness told us this as well, of course.
You also told us I had very big ears. Now, my question is, because what I straight away had to think of was this story that is very famous.
Yeah.
I unfortunately have forgotten the name of the great bodhisattva who was teaching, and it's very often told, I think I even heard that story from you in Dagpo, that he was giving teachings and a dog was being beaten close to him, or there were stones throwing onto
Yes,
the
he's
dog.
one of the three masters of Atisha.
Exactly.
Yes.
I knew it wasn't a tisha,
Yes,
but I knew it was
yes,
somehow
yeah.
connected. And then he fell off his throne
Yes,
because due to his bodhicitta, he took on the suffering of
Yes.
that dog.
yes.
So this story just came up in my mind. So how does that work then?
I think we have to understand that story in a kind of subtle way. First of all, he was not himself, of course, a Buddha at that time. So perhaps the emotional intensity of what he was doing caused him to react in that way to the dog's suffering. But it could not be that, in fact, the karma of the dog was transferred onto him. So I would understand in that way that it was his emotional reaction which caused this. So it's like a reaction in sympathy to the dog's suffering.
So, excuse me if I, but does that also mean as long as we have not realized emptiness fully,
Yeah.
or if there is there still this concept of emptiness that it can happen if we take on, or if we really make the wish to take on the suffering of others, that we do have physical symptoms?
No, I don't think we should worry about it. I rather regard this story as a story with a special intention, which is to say we should be willing to do this. Often in the teachings we talk about teachings that requires, it said, special intent. We need to understand what was the intention. Usually that's for sutras, passages in the sutras and tantras. But I think we can apply that method of interpretation even to a story like that when it concerns a kind of trainee bodhisattva like Maitri Yogin that the master we're talking about. No, it cannot be that the dog's karma transferred to him, even though he hadn't realized emptiness, because it doesn't transfer to us either, and we haven't realized emptiness properly.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you again for all this. Just as a technical clarification,
Yeah.
it seems as though we're almost forgetting that we're actually visualizing ourselves as Chenrezig, correct?
We are, if we wish to, we can do this. That is, remember, usually in the Lojong teachings, the other commentaries, that point is not made. But Rinpoche wants to bring it in here to say, because so many people practice Chenrezig, I think, that he wants to say, well, they can be brought together, these two practices.
It just seems to me that visualizing yourself as Chenrezig while you're practicing Tonglen,
Yeah.
then there's certainly no worry because
Of course.
you're not bringing anything personal into your habitual self. So
Yes, of
it's-
course, that is a very good point.
So that just seems like a safeguard.
It could be understood that way because, of course, no dirt can stick on Chenrezig. So that is another ground for fearlessness then. Yes.
Thank you.
Excuse my English. I have heard.
Excuse my French.
I have heard that to do Lojong
Yeah.
and to do Tonglen,
Yes.
you must have taken bodhisattva vows.
Yes.
Is it true?
It is because
So
what is the purpose
anyone
of
who
it?
doesn't have bodhisattva vows
Yes.
normally cannot do Lojong and Tonglen.
When we say cannot, it's more like this. What is the purpose of it? The purpose of practicing Tonglen is to achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of others. If one is not willing to commit oneself to that, there is no purpose in the practice. So it's not like, oh, there's a rule from Mahayana headquarters. but so it's a very good question for me to clarify this, that I can clarify. It's senseless. It makes no sense to practice Tonglen without having made the Bodhisattva vow. And nowadays, of course, because of the leakage of Dharma concepts and ideas into the kind of general secular world, as you can see with the mindfulness movement, there are even some people, I believe, kind of thinking they're practicing and teaching Tonglen. But unless it's in the Mahayana Buddhist context, it's not our practice.
Dear Lama,
Yeah.
One technical question again.
Mhm.
Can we also use the guru in our heart for the transferring part?
Well, the guru in your heart, because in the Guru Yoga, the guru is descended and is in your heart, dwelling in the pavilion of light. If, for instance, one could feel that when one is taking in the negativity, that it is dissolved on contact with the guru in your heart. That the guru in your heart is, of course, your Buddha nature, which is incorruptible, cannot be made impure. So that gives you the confidence then to know whatever comes in has no negative effect. So that is why the Guru Yoga ends with the Guru coming into your heart.
Thank you.
So,
Good.
I'm on Thaye. If I myself am suffering,
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend at this moment to practice Tonglen with others, or would it be better to first practice with my own pain and so on?
Actually, we're going on to that. That point will be dealt with very shortly in the text.
It
Well,
will
you-
be done.
Yes, where you consider your own suffering and try to purify that before going on to practice the taking on the suffering of others.
Ah, yeah.
So my general answer, however, is that one needs to feel quite healthy and quite strong, quite happy in order to enter into Lojong practice. If one is feeling particularly weak and not confident, then Lojong might be somewhat difficult. Although Lojong is a cure for all problems, and even one's own suffering one can use in the Lojong practice to take the suffering away from others. But my general advice to people is to approach this with a kind of quite happy and positive mind, or else one might, in a way, be imbalanced to start with, and then the practice will not be successful. So that's my general advice.
Much.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is a bit for me to continue to reflect upon this practice.
Yeah.
Now I am on the stage that I think because I have this thing of being nervous about this practice, taking other suffering. And while you were explaining it today, my question is it sincere from my side if I know that I will not get this suffering to say that, oh, I'm taking this suffering?
Yes, it is.
Because I don't feel it sincere then if I know that they will not come to me,
Mm-hmm.
then my kind of motivation is a bit
Less.
fake, kind of.
Well, that is a point, you see, but still the immediate sense that I'm open to everything coming from other beings does something to your heart. It kind of unlocks a knot in your heart. So it's a skillful means practice. Works for most people. So I wouldn't worry about thinking it's fake. All our practice is fake.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it possible to multiply ourselves during Tonglen practice like in Samantabhadra wishing prayer?
Yes, actually it is, because there is a lojong based upon this. I mentioned the other day that there's a collection of teachings called the Lojong Jatsa, the 100 lojongs, and there's not actually. Whenever a Tibetan text says 100 something, it's usually much fewer, but it's just an exaggeration. But there is one of the lojongs in there is the lojong of Samantabhadra, and it's based upon the prayer, and the visualization for the practice includes the multiplication of one's bodies. So yes, it is.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hi.
thank you very much for the teachings. My question is, I'm doing the Nyandra, almost halfway through, and the Lojong inspires me very much. I'm not sure how to integrate it into my daily practice because seems like too much practice with the Nyandra and Lojong. And second part is you said it's good consult with a personal Lama.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have a personal Lama who would give me like personal advice.
Who gave you the Nundra?
Lama Ole.
He's your personal Lama.
Yes.
But anyway, just to answer this briefly, as I said to somebody else earlier, it is taught in some Nundros, and therefore one could carry it across to the Kaji Mahamudra Nundra, which I presume you're doing, that you can do a little bit of the send-in taking after the Bodhisattva vow prayer. We may, in the Kaji tradition, we generate Bodhicitta through the Bodhisattva vow prayer. So at that time, you can do a little bit of Tonglen, just maybe for 2 or 3 minutes or 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. It will be very nice, because it's strengthening what you've just vowed in the Bodhisattva vow. So it's not going to complicate your Nundro, it's not going to add too much to it, but you're connecting with Lojong. That would be very nice.
And the ultimate bodhicitta?
The ultimate bodhicitta is at the end, the Mahamudra.
Okay.
Because in Mahamudra teaching, the Mahamudra is none other than the ultimate bodhicitta. Here it's presented in a sutra style, not a tantra style, but one should consider this is the, really ultimately the same point.
Thank you.
Emptiness.
Greetings, Lama. Thank you for your precious teachings. I have a question regarding the practice. So I heard that in order to practice Tonglen, you gotta first master Shamatha or Shina. Is it true?
Well, look, even here, of course, to paraphrase Bill Clinton, It depends what master means. but, and he's not one. But what I'm saying is, even here in the instruction, there's a little emphasis on shamatha. The counting of 21 is said to be what is necessary to go into the main phase of the practice. Because a completely wild mind, completely unstable mind, cannot do either the ultimate bodhicitta or conventional bodhicitta. Shamra Rinpoche himself emphasized a lot the practicing shamatha as a necessary preliminary for lojong, and that's very good advice. Here it doesn't sound like it's emphasized quite so much. Point, do the 21 countings at the beginning of every session to stabilize yourself for lojong. And if somebody was a complete beginner to meditation, I would say, well, probably best for you to begin with a lot more shamatha, for a while, and then approach the lojong. But as for mastery, that depends exactly what you mean. But at least to have a stable and settled and flexible mind, so that you don't get caught up in conceptualization or waves of emotion when you're doing the practice. So I agree with Shamra Rinpoche's point, of course. He was a great master.
And so what would be the indicator of being able to tame your mind? And
that when you sat down to practice, it's quite easy to drop the normal conceptualization that you had before you started to sit. And it's quite easy to rest there. And when you want then to go on to the focus of the meditation, for instance, in the ultimate bodhicitta, considering that all phenomena are like dreams, you can do that without it just being a lot of words. You can really be present to that kind of just enough and stable enough to really attend to feeling sentient beings are all around me. And as I'm breathing in, I'm taking their suffering, without that being over-intellectual or artificial or forced. That's why, but if either of them become artificial, then, as I said to somebody earlier, just drop them and return to a kind of basic shamatha.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Dear Lama, thank you for your teaching.
Okay.
I would like to ask you about a situation when I would like to practice for the person. About him, I thinking as about enemy.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that this is from my mind and my emotions, but in this about case when I have not so good relation, and I'm afraid a lot of also of this person because this is my boss in when I work. So.
I think many of us have been there.
So, and for me, this is really serious
yes.
situation because I'm feeling that he has not so good, how to say, thinking about me.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, probably karma is the reason, yeah. So I would like to practice to him. Imagine as me, I am as a Chenrezig, and to send him good energy, but how to imagine him, how to do it?
Well, I think what is also good to help with this, if there's a very strong enemy in one's life, is first of all to develop equanimity towards them, a balanced mind. And one good way to do that is to recall the teaching that Nagarjuna makes, which is friends of today are enemies of tomorrow. Enemies of yesterday are friends of today. In other words, there's no certainty in samsara. The situation could just slightly change. In another life, he could be this, he could be that. Use your imagination to think of how this relationship between the two of you could be very different. Or imagine also how he is maybe with his family. Maybe he's a very loving father. Maybe he's very kind. So you stop fixing on one image of him. So this is not, so you change, you get a more flexible, more wider picture of him than you have at the moment. that will then make it easier to practice the taking the sufferings from him when you could see him in this wider way. So first practice equanimity. That's what I would say to do. Okay.
Hello, thank you for the teachings. I have a question about what Gyao Karmapa already answered brilliantly, but I'm still working through it, about the wishes that we make every day. Is such a big part of our practice, and that they don't actually come true. I guess it's the flip side of what you explained about taking the suffering. It's actually not also happening.
Yes.
So if you could enlighten me and us a bit further, how do wishes actually work or not work? And I know that it was already answered perfectly well. I just am working.
Okay, from a lower level kind of answer. Actually, it is taught that there are two kinds of wishes, realizable and non-realizable, and both should be practiced. The meaning is this, that there are some wishes we might make, such as through practicing giving now, may I be wealthy in the next life. That is actually a realizable wish, a realizable aspiration, because it invokes the power of karma. And from the cause, giving, there is the result, wealth. That's realizable. So and also there may be, may there, by the practice of my giving, may there be medicine for others in a certain situation. That's still kind of realizable. Therefore, we should practice it because it creates a good attitude in our mind. It is part of the bodhisattva practice. But then there's unrealizable dedications or aspirations, such as may all sentient beings immediately be free from suffering. That cannot happen because they need to train their minds individually to do that, and has never happened up till now. So it's unrealizable. Yet still we make such aspirations, like in the King of Aspirations prayer. So they're the unrealizable type. But they're powerful practice because they shape our bodhisattva attitude. So this is really what it goes back to. How is it changing us when we make these aspirations? Even these extraordinary, ambitious beyond ambitious aspirations, the unrealizable ones, they work in changing us. And therefore, of course, indirectly they do benefit others, because the more compassion is generated in us, by us making these aspirations, the kinder we are to everybody we meet. So there is a payoff for others indirectly from our aspirations.
So does it mean that our own realization is really the most useful to others by being a good example once we are realized?
No, not just a good example. Buddhas actually show beings effectively the way they can become Buddhas themselves. We can't do that now. So we train in the Bodhisattva path, a core part of which is making aspirations. So it's not just that the Buddhas are an example, that we wish to set a good example. We wish to have the ability of the Buddhas in order that we can then really effectively work for others. Yeah. That's it then. Okay.
No more questions.
Okay. There's no end to questions. Right? So we have some time. So let's go on to the subsequent stage of instruction for relative bodhicitta. So Rinpoche says, in the post-meditation phase, i.e. between sessions, always repeat phrases such as the following. This will help one truly to apply the teachings in practice, such as the following phrase: 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. So, what is this? Well, in a way, mind training is just a series of slogans, of like encouragements or exhortations. And so the thing about slogans is we should internalize them. so that they become part of our continuing attitude. If we train in remembering slogans, gradually it becomes the most natural thing in the world to behave in accord with them. So Lojong has its slogans, and here is one of them: 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. And as one should memorize this and keep calling it to mind, so that it is there in your mind when you meet a situation which demands it. Let Rinpoche explain more. So, 3 objects, it says. Rinpoche explains. Longing is the desire to steal and so on, in us, the poison. That are attractive to us. So this is the first object, beautiful objects. The first poison, desire. In us, that's what habitually happens. Because the imprints of desire are so strong in us, and because we lack mindfulness, we don't remember the teachings. So whenever we encounter a desirable object, it's like a stimulus for desire rising in us, because we're so habituated to it. So now we're wishing to break that chain of reaction. We're wishing to break it and somehow bring that negative emotion and turn it into the path, turn it into a root of virtue. So how would we do that? Well, we'll see. So the second object is unpleasant objects. Rinpoche says, concerning the second poison, which is hatred, this means the emotions such as anger, malice, rancor, lying, slandering, harsh speech and wrong views, they all arise in regard to objects that repel us, such as enemies and demons. And the emotion that arises, therefore, is, in short, hatred. So unpleasant objects, ugly objects in whatever way, for us, that's a stimulus usually to hatred. Again, because the imprint of hatred is so strong in us, we have no mindfulness, so immediately we encounter an ugly object, we react with disgust or hatred. And then the third poison is ignorance. So how does that? Rinpoche says, to define the mind of ignorance, or the poison of ignorance, a mind which has no harm towards or benefit towards sentient beings or objects that are neutral to us, but is, while within being indifferent, is still grasping at existence. This is ignorance. Let me explain that again in more detail. The third poison is ignorance. Now, in one way, ignorance looks like something neutral, because it arises in response to objects that don't interest us, as well as objects that fascinate us and to which we have desire, and other objects that make us feel uncomfortable, therefore we have hatred or aggression. There's a whole category of objects and people that we meet that simply do not interest us. Therefore, we're indifferent towards them. But this indifference is not equanimity. Why is it not equanimity? This is the poison of ignorance, because one is still clinging to the existence of these things. One is still assuming these things are real and out there, separate objects. Just as one desires objects one thinks are real and separate and out there, and hates objects one feels are separate and out there, so one is indifferent to objects one feels are real, separate and out there. So those are the three objects. Beautiful ones, poison is desire. Ugly ones, the poison is hatred. Uninteresting ones, neutral ones, the poison is ignorance. That's, in a way, describing our experience from day to day. Just a set of encounters with these three categories of objects, and us reacting in this way with desire, hatred, or ignorance. So how to break that chain, and more importantly, how to get back to bodhicitta. Because this habitual reaction will kill any bodhicitta we may be generating in the session of meditation. If we do the session of meditation, we meditate, send and taking to others, and then immediately we leave the cushion, we're back to the same old set of reactions. There's ugly, I hate it. There's beautiful, I must have it. There's no space for bodhicitta to survive in our heart. So what to do? Turn them into roots of virtue. Rinpoche says, recognize these three emotions to be like three poisonous substances, roots that produce suffering for oneself and others, and eliminate them as far as possible by using this method that's embodied in the phrase. Objects, three poisons, three roots of virtue. And he says, Jamgon Kongtrul explains this in some detail in his commentary on the Lojong, The Direct Path to Enlightenment. So, the principle is this: when desire arises in our mind, because we've just encountered a beautiful object, one should think, may all the defilement of desire that other beings are experiencing now, may it all come into my desire. May my desire, as it were, be like a magnet that draws the defilement of desire, the disturbing emotion of desire, from all these others. May they therefore be free from desire. They have the virtue of being free from desire. And now that they're losing their desire, may they be always free from desire until they achieve Buddhahood. So, in other words, it's a version of the taking practice. In this case, one is taking the desire, the disturbing emotion desire, which produces suffering for others, even though they don't realize it immediately. We take it onto ourselves. But particularly, we use our own poison that's arising, our own poisonous emotion, as the way to draw it. It's like, I have desire, so I'll use that to take all the desire away from others into my own, without fear of the consequence. Because one might say, but in that case, that just means I'll have mega desire. I've trouble bad enough now with my desires. Now you're asking me to have everybody's desire into mine. Isn't that a recipe for trouble? Actually, no, it is not, as we'll see. The same practice when we encounter an ugly object. As Rinpoche says, do the same when hatred arises. Think, may all the defilements of hatred of every sentient being be gathered into my hatred. May they all gain the root of virtue of being free from hate. Now that their defilements are overcome, their defilement of hatred is overcome through my practice of taking it, may they remain free from hatred until they achieve Buddhahood. And in the same, when ignorance, when one feels just indifferent to objects, bored and indifferent with objects, one should have the same type of aspiration. May all the defilements of ignorance that other beings are having, may they be gathered into mine. May they have the freedom, the virtue of freedom from ignorance. And now that their defilement of ignorance is overcome, may they be free from ignorance until Buddhahood. So, now Rinpoche says, to explain this properly, fully. When one thinks this thing in response to one of the objects arising, and one of the poisons arising in response to that object in oneself, when one just remembers these words or even recites them out loud to oneself, the afflictions of the three poisons will be transformed by the path of sending and taking into three vast roots of virtue. What he means is this. What has happened at the end of this sequence? You went from a negative emotion which would create great suffering, because desire proliferates, it causes one to be unhappy and frustrated and neurotic. but one has turned it around. It's like one's flipped it over. And it ends by being a wonderful, compassionate emotion that I'm taking all the suffering others are having through their desire, I take away. I wish to take it away from them. Your mind at the end of that sequence is a wholly positive, wholly virtuous mind. There's no self-clinging at that moment. The selfishness and the tightness of desire has utterly been burst apart, like popped. And now you have in your heart instead just concern for others, just kindness and concern, compassion for others. And you've known the poison to begin with becomes a virtue. What was a negative thing, a cause of suffering, becomes a positive thing. Your very emotion of desire. As I say, you've used the energy of your desire to bring in the suffering from desire of all beings. It's like an alchemy. A poison is transformed into a medicine. The same goes for other defilements beyond just desire, hatred, and ignorance, such as the defilements of pride or jealousy or avarice. If they're redirected in this way, at the very moment they arise, because that's the key thing, why we should train in the slogan is so we're ready when an object, a beautiful object arises and we see the poison of desire arise in our mind, we apply the remedy. I make it a root of virtue. Because I remember to do so because I've been training in the phrase, training in the slogan. This is excellent when one redirects the poison in. It's like transforming a heap of rotting food or transforming excrement and urine into manure, which when you spread it over a field will produce a good harvest. In other words, my disturbing emotions are a manure out of which the crop of compassion and wisdom will be produced. It's said that the Bodhisattva has that skillful means. That skillful means to transform the disturbing emotions into the causes of enlightenment. So that is the meaning of this phrase, 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. So one should memorize it and be ready to train with it whenever the opportunity, the need arises. And then Rinpoche inserts here kind of a little teaching from Guru Padmasambhava about how to meet emotions when they arise, disturbing emotions when they arise. But this instruction is in a way more like applying the view of Mahamudra or Dzogchen rather than this technique of transformation that has just been explained to us. So Rinpoche quotes Padmasambhava. Guru Rinpoche said, whatever thoughts based on the 5 poisons arise, which are the flickering motion of mental objects, meet them first. Do not engage in contrived mental analysis afterwards. Thought's activity left in its natural state is liberated into the Dhammakaya. This is very much the Mahamudra or Dzogchen approach, that actually even the disturbing emotions arising as they do in response to objects, they're primordially nothing other than empty. They have no core, no solidity. They are actually just like the waves of the sea are no more than the ocean, and therefore the ocean, when you see them from that point of view, as they arise and pass away by themselves, they do not cause any disturbance to the ocean. So thoughts do not disturb the natural purity of mind, which is the Dhammakaya. So if you have that confidence in the view of Dzogchen and Mahamudra, whatever thoughts arise for you, they naturally liberate themselves. So Rinpoche says, in that case, if one can apply this view without accepting or rejecting, like grasping at thoughts or trying to suppress them, don't suppress, don't grasp, just leave things as they are in their natural state. This method to transform mental activity into primordial wisdom is an essential key point. So Rinpoche doesn't further explain this here, but as I say, it is like if we have confidence the experiential confidence in Mahamudra or Dzogchen, then this is how we would respond to thoughts, poisonous thoughts when they arise. So we have some more to do to complete this instruction for the subsequent stage of relative bodhicitta, but we will have to leave it till Thursday. So let's conclude now with the dedication of merit. Sonam de tamshi zikpane tobene pe ranam pamchine chiganachi bala trupaye sipi sole drowa sho. Okay.
Dear friends, we have one very joyful announcement about a movie premiere. I don't know if you have heard, but on the 9th at 8 p.m. We will have a movie premiere about Shama Rinpoche, movie directed and made by Topka Korlo. So the premiere will take place in front of the Jampa. Everybody are welcome to join. And please spread the word among other friends. And we cannot wait to see you here at 8 p.m. on the 9th in 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Kadin Chimbagon and Jizonda Kusonto Jing, Odonzadozo, Kusonto Jing, Odonzadozo, Kusonto Jing, Odonzado, so. Good afternoon, and also good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who might be viewing this also. Once again, it's a great pleasure to be with all of you. I hope all of you had some time to reflect. As I mentioned yesterday about the practice of refuge and the practice of bodhicitta. And I hope the morning sessions were also very fruitful, interesting, and helpful. We really have to acknowledge and know that we are. I'm not sure if when I use the word lucky, but nevertheless, we are very lucky. We are very fortunate to be able to have time like this, to spend some time together like this. Let's say if we, in a different context, if you think of various sentient beings or sentient beings like ourselves, fellow human beings who are in various conditions, we really have to consider ourselves extremely fortunate because first of all, to have this quiet and peace, and to have this leisure and to have this abundance of time. And there are many, many others. We cannot imagine how many there are. We know from, maybe there are some that we know through various information that goes around, news that goes around. Then when we reflect on those, there are, as we speak, there are many fellow humans, meaning on this planet itself, that there are many out there who are experiencing various forms of difficulties, challenges due to various causes and conditions, which I will not go into detail because maybe to some of you it may be very disturbing to think of their conditions. But nevertheless, it is still very important to reflect on those, circumstances. And so therefore, then if you think of where we are or how we are at the moment, then it kind of maybe we can kind of connect to what the teaching always says about the precious human existence and the 18 different qualities that constitutes a precious human existence. We can really feel that we are part of that, Still, of course, many of us, even though we have the aspiration, we have the motivation to be a Bodhisattva, let's say, or to be a practitioner, even in that situation, we can also see not exactly our shortcomings, but maybe in terms of maybe certain lack of merit. Most importantly, even though we may seem to have time, at the same time we somehow don't. And so we can kind of confirm through our individual experiences or collectively that we are kind of forced or driven by various currents of life. And so therefore to utilize these precious moments, I think, is very important. And we are doing our best, of course, meaning the precious teachings or precious Dharma like this that was taught by truly realized Bodhisattvas like Shantideva is in a way very challenging to understand. Yet at the same time, we are also very fortunate that no matter how challenging it may be to relate to what he's saying, to apply the advices that are given here, he has made it extremely applicable, extremely understandable, and so therefore all we need to do is probably give a bit of time and never feel that that we know better, or this is not exactly my cup of tea. With anything, if given the time, circumstances, we can learn or we can understand. Yet at the same time, we don't have to feel pressurized that we have to become perfect scholars out of these through learning these teachings. And because the aim is not to gain recognition or degrees or things like that. The aim or the motivation of these teachings are for us to, just as I said, to realize and to be very appreciative of what we have, and then through that appreciation, then without having to be told or forced or nudged, we ourselves know what to do. We are all, how to say, intelligent. We are all capable. There is nothing that we cannot accomplish. All we need to do is give a bit of time, listen, watch, and then everything sort of sinks in. And then once we get a grip on what these teachings are trying to tell us, then, as I said, without having to be told, we ourselves will know what to do, or something innately, an aspiration will come, from within, and that is, I think, very beautiful, and that is really wonderful, because that's how it should be. stranger that I say that that's how it should be, but that's kind of how it is, you know. And if you see an artist, or if you see a sculptor or a painter or a chef, or you know, then most of us, let's say, adequately know how to draw or how to cook, but nevertheless, maybe for some reason, maybe we don't really find joy in what we do. But watching the artistry of these craftsmen, then it can inspire us, you know. It can become, how to say, an activity. You know, we always use the word karma, but in Western term, I'm not sure if there is the exact translation for it, but whereas in Tibetan, then of course various names are there. And then one of the curious things that I felt was the term we use for karma, which is le, you know. In Wiley, I think it's L-E-S, or just for pronunciation, it's just L-E, le. And in Tibetan, of course, there is this always a differentiation between when we say, when we describe the karma of someone, let's say, realize, then we don't call that le, we call that tinle, you know. But bottom line is the same. But the interesting thing about that, through my own reflection, is that, let's say, our own understanding and skill of cooking is like the general le, you know, the action. Whereas the artistry that comes from someone who is well versed is like chinle, same thing. Let's say if you have a piano or a guitar, I don't know how to play, but maybe some of you do. If we play, or if I play, it's like le, you know, it's just karma. So if I'm lucky, maybe I'll hit the right notes, but otherwise it's just noise. But if it is played by somebody who is really passionate about it, who really enjoys, then it's pure music, yes? But it's the same piano, you know, it's the same hand, played by same humans. So it's something like that, you know. And so therefore, right now we may not be, a complete master of our le, or of our karma, but the only way, or the few ways, let's say, that we can become a master of it is by, first of all, by listening, by watching. Of course, we call that learning, but I don't know if that's the right word, because learning and teaching probably are words that are a little bit strange, meaning that behind the thought process, behind those words, somehow suggests as if we are ignorant, you know. And the truth is, none of us are ignorant. And so therefore, we don't really need to learn, we don't really need to be taught. But we have the ability to watch it, you know, to listen. And so therefore, just by observing, basically, then we will see the quality of it. and then the inspiration will come. And then, of course, the next step is then to try. And to try and try and try by making lots of mistakes, you know, and never ever be afraid in making mistakes during the continuous attempts. And so, for example, someone like Shantideva or any of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or Arhats, all of them, that's how they became a master of their karma, one could say. Because we cannot get rid of karma, you know, there is no way actually. Just for certain reasons, we sometimes say we have to purify karma or to let go of karma and so on. It's just, those are just motivational methods or words. But ultimately, first of all, we cannot get rid of karma. And secondly, or most importantly, there is no karma in a way to purify. But that's a different topic. So, all in all, let's say that we are used to at least the idea that there is karma, you know, that there are things going on, that there are things happening around. Let's say we happen to be born, we happen to be living, and we happen to die as well, and so on. So there seems like as if probably the karma may be the most appropriate way to symbolize all these things that are happening around. And so therefore, these teachings that we apply are ways to become master of what is happening around. And as I said, people like Shantideva, through various attempts, without being embarrassed, you know, in this case. Normally, I think in a society there are places maybe to save face or to try to gain a composure, dignity, and so on, and it's required. Those things are required by society, according to the standard of society and so on. But when it comes to spirituality, then I think at the core of it, there are places where we don't have to be shy about it. So in this case, particularly in terms of practice, I think it's really one most important place where we shouldn't be embarrassed through failure, you know, and successively keep trying. Keep trying to listen, keep trying to watch, keep trying to contemplate, keep trying to meditate. As we say, apply ourselves, but through that way, not through fear of failure, but more through just having been inspired. And so that's exactly how all these, each and every, actually not all just, but each and every Bodhisattvas, how their activity or how their works have come across to us and echoes in our heart, not just for us, to the few of us here, but to countless of beings through, as we say, in a historical manner, through the ages, you know, and it will continue to echo for millennia, actually. And so, yeah, these are the opportunities we have. We may just have the opportunity to maybe just go through one or two points. But nevertheless, how to say, we have the opportunity to, we have the opportunity to embrace that, as I said, to listen to that, you know, and to reflect on that. So even if we haven't a proper grasp on what this vehicle is really about, even if we just are able to hang on to just some bits and pieces, it's already great. Yeah? And so, in that way, then we motivate ourselves, as I said yesterday, with the motivation of thinking of others. It really depends on how you view the others. Maybe to some of you, to think of others may be difficult. Maybe you have trust issues, you know. How reliable they are, this so-called other. But maybe that's a good point to reflect upon. Maybe because the other, the so-called other, is not reliable, and maybe that will give us the right reason, you know. Maybe that will be the reason to actually motivate ourselves. So bread making or baking, you know. I wish in the future we can have, instead of teachings, maybe we can have baking lessons, you know. By now, I have probably read a few books about baking. Probably that was one of the ways to pass time during the pandemic. Yes. First thing was the collection of toilet papers. Maybe we don't remember by now, but I remember at the time. I didn't collect toilet papers, but I collected a lot of flowers, a lot of different types of grains. I even tried to acquire one of those electric millers, and so the common thing that all those bakers, what they say is that, of course, most of them have become experts, of course, and their business is doing well in a way, and that's how they are able to publish those books or blogs or you know, various things. But nevertheless, they always say that no matter how well they know, every morning is different. That the result that comes, because you have to always be on a lookout for the various conditions, mainly temperature, humidity, and then the types of flour, water, and so on and so forth. So. But they said, in a way, because it's challenging, it gives them the energy to do it, to try it every day, you know. And so no matter how expert they are, how well-versed they are in their craft, that it's always a surprise, you know. And that they go through the whole process, but at the end of the day, when the bread comes out of the oven, that they are always kind of giddy, you know. That even though they are that experienced, And so therefore I found those passages very interesting, because I think it's the same for us. If we are interested to practice, if we are interested to understand how life is, that you can never trust life. So obviously we have trust issues. And so, because the reality is that yesterday's person is not exactly today's, but we think they are. They look kind of similar, they walk in a similar manner, and they seem to behave in a similar manner. So therefore, we just roughly say, I think that's the same person, you know. And so, of course, it's a kind of deception to think in that way, because then that creates the basis for trust issues. Whereas these bakers, they kind of accept by then. So that every morning is different. And so therefore, it's always a surprise. And therefore, it keeps them going, you know. So in our, yes, maybe you're wondering, did I just read that or did I attempt? Yes, I did. And I have to say I'm okay by now, you know. If given the circumstances, if you give me the kind of flowers I like to use, or if you have a proper oven, I think I might be able to surprise you. It is true, as they say, it's therapeutic in some ways, but for me it was actually giving a lot of stress, actually. But it was a very beautiful stress, you know, because there you realize that you cannot really get rid of stress, you know. That you've gone through the whole process, because now I take pride that I don't like to use commercial yeast, and instead I use the natural leaven. And and so therefore, when you do it that way, you have actually less and less control. And then you really have to think of timing, feeding schedules, and then the way you shape, the techniques, the temperature of the oven, the steam. So maybe some of you know where I'm going, you know. So, but I don't know if you have baked, but we sure know that we kind of like bread, yes? Or whatever type of bread. So, yes, by reflecting on those things, those really mundane, it really goes into, it kind of reflects, or it helps in what we are trying to attempt. And so therefore, yeah, the first step is really just to watch. And that doesn't mean to waste time and not do anything, you know. I'm not saying just see what happens, but it's the attitude, yes. As I said earlier, we are driven by the current of life, and so apparently at the moment the current is that of success. Not that that was not part of life in the past, but probably now more. We are driven more by that idea of success. And probably in a worldly circumstances, maybe it's okay, you know. Maybe there are places, maybe there are right places and right moments to think of success. But in terms of spirituality, I think it doesn't really go all that well in terms of let's say in terms of maybe conquering our emotions or changing the fate of but yes, it has its own place to motivate ourselves, but beyond that, it has no place. So in terms of helping others, being kind, being supportive, obviously those are all practices of a bodhisattva. But we also have to know that first of all, as we say sometimes, maybe it's an English saying, we are only human, that there are limitations, that we only have two hands or things like that. And so therefore we have to know that we can only do so much. And so therefore listening and watching and observing means that we don't overstress ourselves to accomplish things. If you listen, not to say carefully or maybe carefully, if you listen with genuine enthusiasm, then we don't need to wait that long to understand. Within a very short amount of time, we will be able to absorb what we wish to do. And so therefore, I'm not saying just be passive, you don't have to do anything, let things slide, you know, not in that sense. But watch, observe, meaning that you know, my late teacher, Professor Sembadorji, he used to sort of put some or give some advices, you know, just in between the line of when he's teaching. And one of the things that I remember is that he used to say, do you remember how many steps there were when you climb from that floor to from the first floor to the second floor? Residents here would have, you know, used those stairs, you know, thousands of times. And by the end of your stay, you would also have used those stairs many times. And so from time to time, it will be interesting to reflect, as Genla said, to be observant about how many steps there were actually, you know. And so he didn't say that was a teaching for this or that particular purpose. But when when I reflected, I understood that, yes, those are actually very subtle teachings, you know, about observation, about watching. Because it's those details, I think, that makes us, if we are thinking of progress, it's those little things that makes us progress. And so therefore, if you're observant, then within a very short amount of time, or without having to depend on time, that we will come to the point of action or doing. you know. So I think it's like that. So, and therefore, never fear that that these teachings are maybe too repetitive or too maybe out of date, maybe cryptic, maybe who knows? Maybe you might even feel it's irrelevant. It's completely your freedom to feel all those, you know. We don't have to block those feelings. But nevertheless, as far as I know, from my experience, is that not that I'm a very good practitioner, but nevertheless, from what I can understand, is that they're extremely precious and extremely helpful. And particularly this teaching, the Bodhicaya Avatara, or the way of Bodhisattva, or the conduct of Bodhisattva, is one of those teachings where it's not taught in an academic way. It's more of a general advice, and it's what we would say in our teaching, part of the mind training, you know. So this is a very extensive mind training. We say Lo Jong. So now when we use the word mind training also, we might have sometimes difficulty in relating to that. Because we all like shortcuts. And so going through this very thick book, and when it comes to the commentary, then even thicker and more volumes, maybe it's already very, very, just to think about it, it's already very tiring. But nevertheless, shortcut, is probably something that is coming from that is being hurried, being how to say, carried maybe too heavily by the current of life, particularly the contemporary lifestyle and mindset. And so therefore we always feel that what is catchy, what is user-friendly, obviously we go for those, you know, instant noodle. Maybe in the West, instant noodle maybe haven't come yet. Has it come? Okay. I thought it was only an Asian thing. Okay. They are delicious though. So therefore, we prefer kind of like maybe gaining realization through one sitting, instant liberation and all that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But I think instant liberation or things like that, when those words were invented, let's say, you know, they were not invented to save time, actually, I think. Maybe they were more fortunate during those eras. because the lifestyle may have been very, very different, you know, just through being farmers and nomads and herders and so on. And so therefore lives were much simpler. And so therefore such words were maybe, of course, beneficial, yet at the same time it didn't in any way imply that you need instant success, or in this way you will save time, and therefore you will be able to multitask, and therefore you will be able to do 4 or 5 things in one go, you know. Because nowadays, when we think of words like that, then it kind of we tend to think we kind of drag those how to say instant liberation as how to say saving time. We may have become comfortable with that in some ways, you know, and to say that we are already liberated and we are already this and that. Not wrong, of course, not wrong at all. If you can really have complete trust in that, that's all that matters. There is no real journey, for sure, actually, and there is no destination. All of this is just a mirage, all of this is just a dream, and so therefore, how to say, not even instant liberation, but we are already liberated, one could say that. And one could say that with full conviction. But nevertheless, let's say that maybe we are, but there are others, you know, who are under the illusion that that there is time, that there is history, that there is a destiny, that, you know, that there are journeys to be taken and so on. So now for their sake, if you say that you don't need to worry, you're already enlightened, they would not they will not be able to comprehend that easily. And so therefore, for their sake, then we have to go with their current or with their rhythm in a way. And so that's why it's I'm saying all that just to how to say have enough reasons to promote mind training. Because when we say mind training, again, if you view the mind training from a perspective that there is time, you know, then of course it makes it very difficult to comprehend. So mind training is relevant, it's beneficial. If we don't bring in the idea of time, you know, then it is timeless, actually. It is a wonderful way to lose oneself, you know, because even though, as I said, there is no real learning, but if one had a good, how to say, or relatively fun childhood, then learning can be fun, right? To think of yourselves not really as ignorant, but as if you don't know, and you did something and you knew, you know. And so the idea of journey can be fun, yeah. So in that sense, the practice of mind training, although we really don't need to train, but to say that doing, you know, that action can be extremely enjoyable. And you know at the back of your mind that you're not really doing this to really learn, but you're doing it to enjoy yourselves. And so therefore, personally for oneself, when we practice, I think that's the sort of the mindset we have to have. But when it comes for others, then if you say that we are taking a spiritual journey through this and we are going to reach this development or growth or bhumi, that this bhumi is it's like sort of motivating ourselves with frequent flyer type of tears, So continuously to say, okay, now if you do this, we will reach this tier, then the next tier there. But there's never an end. And the industry does that, but more than that, doing that to ourselves, if you do it the right way, it's fun. Because we really don't want to know the end. If one reads a novel or a story or something, we really don't want to know the end. Even though we do want, but there is a part of us where we always wish that we never knew the ending, So it's like that. All these practices, all these trainings, that it will always give the illusion that we are getting somewhere, And sometimes when we make a mistake, then we tend to ask, someone who's more advanced or a spiritual friend, to ask what is one's progress, where am I at? But actually there's no real need to ask for that, because if you know what the practice is all about, then it's not really about reaching anywhere, but just doing it all the time. And if one makes a few mistakes here and there, again it gives us the reasons to practice more in a way. So those are the kind of, I think, things we have to understand. As I said, these are more of advices. It's almost like as if Shantideva is sort of giving you the hand, like when we walk children, like the parents will give their finger like this, right, so that they can hang and sort of like guide you. So therefore it's just like that. And so therefore there is no sense of mission or success. It's all just about just being a real friend. That's all it is. Because to find a good psychiatrist is very difficult, to find a good priest or to find a good Lama is very difficult. Meaning that at the end of the day is a person, on the other side. And so the person is, always changing. From the moment the person is born until that body transforms or dissolves, is constantly changing. And so therefore, the teaching here is sort of the spiritual friend of yours coming in the form that is not a person, but in words, in advices, in practices, in guidelines. And so therefore, it's always timeless. So therefore, in the teachings, Buddha says, rely, how is it? rely on the teaching, but not the person. And he didn't mean that to say that the person is deceitful or anything like that, but so in a negative way. But it is the truth. All of us are changing. We always have changed. And just like the weather, we can never really predict, you know. No matter what kind of satellite we install, what kind of gadgets we install, we can never have a 100% accurate weather forecast. So in the same, in a similar manner, no matter what kind of let's say mental technology we or conceptual technology we accumulate or acquire, we can never predict the person, you know, because it's naturally changing. It has to change, because otherwise there is no growth. And so therefore, but the teaching is then, how to say, presenting exactly that. And so therefore, particularly with this text, then if you read, I would really suggest for you to read over and over again. It could be a good bedtime story for yourself, you know. It could be a very good book to put yourself to sleep. It could be a very good book to read in the morning to wake yourself up. It could be a very good book to pass the time. It could be a good book to also formally practice. So in many ways, it's your best friend. That's what my teachers have said, that there is no one like these teachings, because there's not a passage in there that says, how to say, be selfish or be unkind or anything like that. Not a single word. Yet at the same time, it can be extremely, how to say, clear, to the point even, you know, that to a point where when you read these passages, it almost feels like as if this book knows me, or knew what I was thinking, or knew what I was doing, that it can spook you. Yet at the same time, because it's a book, it's not a person, then in a way there's a sort of a sanctuary, you know. There is a sort of a sense of security. And so, therefore, it's the best, you know. Yeah. So, yes. But now, yeah. For those of you who have been here, then you would know, it was 3 years ago, right? The verse was, I think, 54 from the 6th chapter, the chapter of patience, where one day I said, "Thank you for your patience." I will read the Tibetan verses first, and then the English verses. Then I will try to describe a little bit. Yenda dala migawa dine tsendian tsejina dala sawar mijena dana chiche temendu. Nyebe parche chebeche kadende da menjuna daki nye bandir dorji dipa dana tembrane. Dana tingni xiang le lonsu yunrin sumerong data yunrin ejujen chiwe dunga teni. Okay. I think it's the 53rd I'm reading, 53rd verse. Neither contempt, abusive speech, nor disgrace harms the body. Why then, mind, do you become angry? Will the unkindness of others towards me devour me in this life, or another that I'm so adverse to it? If I'm adverse to it because it hinders my material gain, my acquisitions will vanish in this life, but my sin will surely remain. It is better that I die today than have a long, corrupt life. For even further living a long time, I shall have the suffering of death. For those of you who are maybe a little bit more familiar, then maybe these words may be easier to understand, even though it's to the point, one could say. I'm not sure what kind of copies of the translation of the verses you have, or what kind of commentaries you're reading, but if you have at least 2 or 3 different types of versions of the translation of the root text and also the commentary, it will be very helpful, because when you compare them, then you will understand more because of the differences, because of the variety. So the chapter is focusing on the practice of patience. As we all know, to recap a bit, the Bodhicaya avatar, which has 10 chapters, as the title suggests, these are practices, advices that helps us to be a bodhisattva, you know, and which means that basically the bodhicitta, the heart of all practices, and so how do we say this? It is said that there are, in each, one could say, universe, one could say, because there is no limit, just as there is no time, and there is, there is no limit in anything, and so therefore, in various universes, the sentient beings' attitude varies, and so therefore, for us in this universe, then we have the luxury of having three vehicles, one could say. And so the vehicles of the elders or Theravada, and then there are the vehicles of the Mahayana, one could say, or probably academically it's more like the ways of the Shravakas, whereas then when we try to be sort of more Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, and so on. But nevertheless, all these vehicles, as I said, in each universe it differs. In some, there are only one vehicle. In some, there are hundreds. In some, there are thousands. So it varies, you know. Each of the vehicles are suitable for each individual, just as we vary in terms of, even though we are in average human beings, we look slightly different, we are built slightly different, and our taste palette is also different, you know. So just like that, in terms of what we say vehicle, or the one could say maybe nutrition, or maybe the perspectives, that also varies, and so therefore the aspiration to be liberated, the aspiration to seek for happiness, the way, you know, we go towards it really varies. And so therefore, when we talk about bodhicitta, maybe that's a word that more of the Mahayana practitioners use, but the idea is the same, meaning that it's to seek liberation, you know. And okay, maybe you are thinking now, where am I going with this? You know, is it about interfaith? Is it about you know, harmony among communities and so on? You know, yes, that goes. But where I'm really trying to get to is that actually we can never really say who practices what, you know. It's impossible to say, actually. Yeah. We could be calling ourselves a practitioner who wishes to be a bodhisattva, but we could be doing something else. Or we could be thinking we are how to say, followers of the Theravada tradition, but at the same time, within that individual's attitude, again, it could vary, you know. So no one can really say. But just for the sake of communication, for the sake of organization, then we label things, you know. That's what we do. We humans are, in a way, the only beings who are very deeply connected with concept. Animals, they do, but it's much simpler. Gods or celestial beings, they also have, but it's also much simpler in their own way. But we are the ones who are, how to say, extremely dependent on concepts. And so therefore, if we need to accomplish something, we need to label things, otherwise we get mixed up, you know. So therefore, for practicality, then we label ourselves like that. But in short, bodhicitta meaning to embrace one's heart. Yes, citta. Citta means heart, and so therefore all sentient beings have that essence, one could say, have that heart, whatever form it may come in, you know. Insects, no matter how small they are, they have that organ. Viruses, even they do, you know. Actually, yes. Of course, I'm not an expert in biology or anything like that, so I wouldn't presume, but I like to think that even viruses have. And so no matter how small they are or how big they are, they all do. But the thing is, we are constantly sort of busy, and so therefore we kind of forget that there is something, you know, here. From time to time, when conditions rise, then this thing at the chest does something unique, you know, does something out of the box. If let's say if someone's in pain, or if someone's in confusion, then it does something. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether the other person is someone you know or someone you don't know, a total stranger. Still, that, as we say, we feel something, that there's a feeling, you know, that we are not just various mechanical parts put together, but there is a core, and that this core how to say, extends feelings, and so that it shows that we are not numb, you know. And so bodhicitta, citta, is where that heart is completely open. In Chinese, I don't know much Chinese actually, but the little that I know when I grew up is when they describe the happiness, you know, the term for happiness is open heart, kaixing. And I found that very beautiful.